What is up, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Kingdom Crew podcast. My name is Josh Fan of ShowMeFootball.com and ArrowheadAddict.com, covering your Kansas City Chiefs. And today I am joined by, as always, the Michael Darcy, my co-host of Bleacher Report, and you know him from KC Sports Report as well. Michael, I know you had to fight through a tornado to get here, so glad to have you. Glad that everything is intact around you. But how are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Josh. Like you said, there's some pretty bad weather going through the Midwest right now. I was at the rec center at KU, had to kind of shelter in place because it was pretty bad outside, but we're all right. Everything's okay. I just got back from Detroit actually covering the NFL draft for 810 and got some good pictures and overall just kind of soaked in that experience. I got to see a couple of the Chiefs draft picks, while all the other media was covering it. So that was pretty cool. And like interviewing guys like Caleb Williams and Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., like seeing all those guys up close was pretty cool. And being around that atmosphere. And listen, I don't want to say that it was not what I expected, but after day one, there's not really much of a reason to be there because the NFL only invited 13 players to be at the draft.
Right.
And after those 13 players went, there's nobody to interview, and it's basically just a glorified watch party with a bunch of NFL media, and there's like a bunch of free food. That's basically it. But it was a really cool experience. I will say I did shit on Detroit a lot before I went there. A very nice city. Granted, they might have, rolled out the red carpet because the draft was coming there, but we walked around downtown and, at one point we were leaving the media room at like 1:30 in the morning. We had a 1.5 mile walk back to our car and we were completely fine. So I will say Detroit was a really cool city and I would definitely go back.
Well, I thought they had a pretty nice setup. Honestly, I thought, they had a nice venue kind of set up there for the draft. It was very open. There wasn't like too much stuff kind of in the way. It was just a bunch of Detroit fans and a bunch of football fans packed in there to watch the NFL draft. But that's a cool experience. And I'm glad you got to go. Like you said, there's only so many players that get invited to the green room. So after they're all off the board, it's kind of like, all right, now we just sit back and watch the draft. And it's like half the picks too, on day 2 and 3 aren't even made at the venue. They're made at different places like military bases that have volunteered to announce a draft pick and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sure it was still a cool experience, like you said. But yeah, no, that's awesome, man. And we'll go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's a bit of a lag, but really quickly, everybody going into the draft was talking about how Caleb Williams was like a cancer and just a locker room problem. Dude, he was maybe the best and the nicest guy to interview. He was so good with the media, and I don't know why he gets so much hate.
Well, the quote that he had about wanting to own part of the team that he got drafted to, I feel like rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I also don't know if Caleb Williams is aware that you cannot play for a team that you also partly own. So I'm not really sure how that would work anyway. But yeah, he's just a kid. He's not. You think about it, he's really not much older than me and you.
Yeah, for sure. But he's a nice guy.
Yeah, good to hear. But we'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs draft class. That's the biggest thing that everyone is still talking about. Of course, we got that post-draft buzz going on right now, and the Chiefs brought in their new draft class, and we'll just kind of round out the picks and kind of talk about each one. We won't spend too long just because there's been so much of that already from everyone else talking about the picks. But Michael, were you shocked by the Xavier Worthy pick? Were you shocked to see the Chiefs trade up and take him on day 1?
I was kind of surprised they traded up. I didn't expect them to have to trade up, but I did a live reaction video from the draft venue, like inside the media workroom. And I was like, it's either A.D. Mitchell, it's Xavier Worthy. Like it's one of those two guys. And listen, he fits the Chiefs prototype. He's fast as hell. And He's a wide receiver that they think they can incorporate into their offense. I wasn't super surprised by the pick. Did they have to trade up? I don't know. I mean, I don't think Buffalo was going to take him. I think they were pretty set on Keon Coleman, but maybe somebody behind Buffalo might have taken it. I don't get, though, why Buffalo would give the Chiefs a opportunity to draft somebody when they're just going to have to play us.
Well, that, you consider the track record there of the Kansas City Chiefs trading with the Buffalo Bills in the NFL draft or trading in front of them. And that makes me feel pretty good about the Xavier Worthy pick. I remember we kind of talked about him a while back, and I said, I had concerns about the weight. He only weighed in at 165 at the NFL Combine, but at the end of the day, this was such a Chiefs move. Like, if we're being honest, drafting a guy who is the fastest player in NFL draft combine history, and I have a lot of hope for him. And I will say that, we don't have to do a whole scouting report on every single player, but I love the fact that there's so many Chiefs fans that have said, he's McCole Hardman 2.0, he's John Ross 2.0. If you watch him, he actually gets open on all three levels of the defense. He can run really good routes. He's an incredible ball tracker. Like, there was a play he had against Alabama last year where, his neck is basically 90 degrees backwards trying to locate the ball. And it's like, when have we ever seen McCole Hardman do that? Never. Yeah. That's the Xavier Worthy is. Go ahead. Yeah, he's just a whole nother level of a prospect.
I was just gonna say, Texas is in the Big 12, or was in the Big 12. So I watched Xavier Worthy against this Kansas defense, and they have a couple guys that, Kenny Logan got picked up by the Rams, and Kobe Bryant might be like a top 3-round draft pick next year. And he shredded us. Like, he absolutely shredded us. And there was a couple of plays where he had 10, 15 yards of separation. So I do like it. I like the pick. And listen, the Chiefs have gotten in a habit recently of picking guys with really high athletic scores. And I like that because, some of the guys that have had lower athletic scores, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, haven't
exactly.
Well.
Exactly.
So I do like the pick.
No, bingo. That is exactly what I'm getting after. And I have friends too that give me shit for incorporating RAS score so much into evaluations, but it's like, the higher the RAS score, the higher the ceiling for that player. And the truth is that bad athletes are significantly less likely to succeed in the NFL. And that's perfect that you mentioned, like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Sky Moore. Those were like not so great athletes. Some of the worse athletes that Brett Veach has drafted as of recently, and they didn't work out.
Yeah, so in the first round, and you traded up in the first round, you gave up capital to go get this guy. He better be an athlete. Better be an athlete. And so the Chiefs got that guy. And listen, you can be a bad football player, but if you're a good athlete, you're going to make it a lot longer in the NFL.
You're just going to get more chances. Yeah.
Yeah. You can always find some untapped potential in a great athlete. With a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you're punching at air because he doesn't have the athleticism to make certain plays that a Xavier Worthy could. And so that's why I like the pick, because the potential upside of his athleticism is greater than if you took anybody else.
Yeah, and also I think another reason to be excited about Xavier Worthy rather than concerned is that he produced at the college level at, way more than John Ross ever did. John Ross in his best season averaged less than 85 yards per game. McCole Hardman was still learning the position when the Chiefs took him. Sky Moore played at a lower level. Xavier Worthy had over 900 yards receiving as a true freshman. And he was, I want to say he was all Big 12 that year as well. First team all Big 12 as a freshman. So this is a guy that has produced at the college level. And then, one of the concerns I hear is, is he going to hold up in the NFL with that weight? And yeah, that is a concern that I have too, because I don't know how you could look at a guy that's 5'11", 165 and not go, I don't know, man. But if you're looking for a reason to be optimistic, and he played 39 games in 3 years at Texas.
I will say, listen, as someone who has seen how wrestling works and cutting weight, Xavier Worthy knew that going into the combine, if he could run a fast 40 time it was going to boost his draft stock. He was probably 175 tops. So he shaved down a little bit of weight to run the fastest 40 time ever. And I'm sure he'll put on a little bit of weight before the football season starts. He doesn't need to be 180 or 190, but if he just puts on a little bit more weight and just isn't what he was when he ran that 40, we're probably not going to have a problem. And listen, I've been around guys like Tutu Atwell for the Rams, not a very big guy, and he's solid. Like, you don't necessarily have to be, 200 pounds as a receiver to succeed in the NFL. When you have that kind of speed and athleticism, we'll be okay.
Well, Devontae Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles, now he's a little bit taller, but he's only 170 pounds. He's done just fine. And Brett Veach did say after they drafted Xavier Worthy in their press conference that they are going to work to get that weight up, and he's going to be working with the nutrition staff and the strength and conditioning coaches. So I'm not too concerned right now. I like the pick, and I think that's probably a good place to put a bow on that. And we'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs second round pick, and that was Kingsley Suamataia, who they traded up. I want to say, or was that the one they traded up one spot to get him? I think they traded up from 64 to 63. Yeah, and they take BYU offensive tackle Kingsley Suamataia. Also another very Chiefs pick because of the Andy Reid BYU connection. But Michael, I think this might be one of the best value picks in this draft. And that's really what the entire Kansas City Chiefs draft class is incredible value. And we'll get more into that later as we get down the list of players that they drafted. But Suamataia was a guy that a lot of people had mocked to the Chiefs in the first round, and they got him in the second round. Now, he might be a little bit more of a developmental tackle, which is okay, but he's got all the physical tools. Again, another freak athlete. And also, you don't need him to come in and start right away. You still have Wanya Morris. There's still that possibility that they re-sign Donovan Smith. So he's coming into a really good situation where he's not expected to start right away. But this is a guy that at worst, I mean, I think could at least play right tackle for you if he doesn't work out at left, because he started 12 games at right tackle in 2022. So I really like this pick. He's also related to Penei Sewell. And there's one more, I can't remember, but he's related to some pretty damn good NFL players as well. And I think you have to feel good about those bloodlines.
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned it, the value that the Chiefs got in the second round with Kingsley, like we were talking about, we could have taken him in the first. I saw a lot of mock drafts that had the Chiefs going tackle in the first, and his name popped up a lot. So the fact that they were able to get him in the second round, only trading up one spot, not having to give up, future capital to trade up like 5, 10, or even 15 picks, you got a tackle that can compete at the left side. Is he going to win it over Wanya Morris? Who knows? I mean, we have to see how training camp goes, and I wouldn't hate bringing in Donovan Smith again and just, maybe having him mentor the younger guys. But, if you go into the season with, is it Suamataia?
That's how I've heard it said.
We're going to have to figure out a nickname for him because that's going to get really, really hard to say. But I think he's going to be able to compete for the left tackle spot. I'm not going to crown him the starting left tackle of the Chiefs. I think that's unfair to him. And especially Wanya Morris, who grinded last year behind Smith and filled in a couple games and didn't look horrible. So I'm not going to say he's a left tackle of the future. I know that there's some people on Twitter, like Lance the Spoken, have said that he is the left tackle for the next 10 years. I was here when we drafted Darian Kennard for the right side, and he ended up not being good at all. So I'm not going to say anything, but I do think it's a good athlete who can compete at the left side, and that's really all I care about.
Yeah, I think this was a really safe pick. You can't. I mean, I don't know how you can hate on this pick considering where the Chiefs got him. I don't even think you'd hear many people complaining if he was the pick in the first round. Getting him at 63 is just a coup. And he's got really good size.
I might have been upset.
Really? Because I would have been fine with it. Now, there was that run on wide receivers, so I'm glad that they got the wide receiver when they did, and Xavier Worthy. And I'm just happy that they addressed the top two needs in the first two picks. They didn't do anything silly. They didn't go and take the best defensive end available in round one or anything. Not that I would have hated it. Not that I would have lost sleep over it. Excuse me. But you address the top two needs in the first two picks. No funny stuff.
Yeah, I think wide receiver was a more pressing need, especially because that's what everybody saw last year is wide receivers dropping passes. And while a tackle, I mean, I wouldn't have hated it as much as a cornerback in the first round, but I do think that it had to go wide receiver and tackle in the second, just because, I mean, tackle, you could roll into the season with Wanye Morris starting at left tackle and be okay. I mean, outside of Hollywood Brown, yeah, I mean, I don't want Kadarius Toney to have to run it back as wide receiver too.
Yeah, for sure. We can agree on that. All right, let's get down to the Chiefs' fourth round pick, their first fourth round pick. They didn't have a third because they gave that up and the trade up for Xavier Worthy. But with that fourth round pick 131, they took TCU tight end Jared Wiley. And man, I got to say, I was kind of shocked that the Chiefs went tight end that early because they just have not shown a willingness to draft tight ends very high. And also, it's just not, it wasn't a strong tight end draft class. But at pick 131, a lot of people considered this to be another great value pickup. You pick up Jared Wiley, who was one of the best offensive players in the Big 12 for the last few years. He led all tight ends last year in touchdowns, first team all Big 12 selection. Another freak athlete, very similar athletic profile and similar size to Travis Kelce. When you watch him play, he moves very similar to Travis Kelce coming out of Cincinnati, and he moves like a wide receiver after he catches the ball and gets it in the open field. He's really fast. And this is also something that I wanted to throw in with this since we got the news yesterday that Travis Kelce was extended for a couple of years. And my little mini theory is that Travis Kelce is a lot more comfortable signing that extension, knowing that the Chiefs have a plan in place for after he's gone, because this is a pretty significant investment into the tight end position, at least relative to what the Chiefs have done in the past few years. The most they've done is spend a fifth round pick on Noah Gray. And Noah Gray is a nice backup, but to me, Jared Wiley is a true investment in the position. Hey, this is a guy we believe could become the next starting tight end after Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce will be here for at least another few years to kind of groom him before he lets Wiley take the reins from him. And this is a really good situation for the Chiefs to have. And this is a really strong tight end room. And here's the other thing too that I'll throw in, Michael, before I let you speak. A lot of people are kind of somewhat disappointed that we didn't come out of the draft with two wide receivers, but Jared Wiley is someone that can help out in the passing game. So this is almost like picking up another wide receiver, in my opinion. This is a guy that I think is going to get a lot of run as a rookie. What do you think?
I really like this pick. I think that the Chiefs, like you said, they did address the tight end need. And after Kelce signed that 2-year deal, I think we already knew that he was getting close to the end, but that 2-year deal kind of signified that that's it. Like 2 more years and he's done. And so to have Jared Wiley on this team, give him a couple years to learn under the best tight end to ever do it. And, you mentioned the similarities to Travis Kelce, how fluid they are and moving. They have very similar relative athletic scores. If we're looking at, how athletic they were both quarterbacks, I believe. And
Yes,
I think that Wiley has not only the athleticism, but he has the skills to produce as a wide receiver right away. And Noah Gray really didn't coming out of the draft. We kind of thought it was going to take some time. So Wiley is a good pick in the 4th round, especially because the Washington Command, and listen, I'm not a K-State guy, rock chalk through and through, and I'm not going to hide that anywhere. But Ben Sinnott, the K-State tight end, was taken in like the 2nd round.
Yeah,
he's not that good.
Yeah, he was like a round 3 to 4 player for me.
Oh, yeah. Listen, he wasn't even – I mean, Wiley was a better tight end in college than he was. Like, that's why I don't understand why, the Commanders reached to get him. And listen, that's no shade at, Sinnott. He was deserving of getting drafted, but not a 2nd rounder. Like, he went way too early. And so I think the Chiefs found good value. I don't know if the Chiefs went into the draft thinking tight end in the 4th. I think it might have been the best player to fall to them at that position, which I'm all for. And listen, we've seen Mahomes elevate the guys around him to perform above expectations. Wiley has the athleticism to produce right away. And listen, with Mahomes throwing him the football, that growth in just a couple years is going to be enough to have him take the step.
I think so too. I think this is a significant investment in the tight end position, a guy that you truly believe can be the tight end of the future. So I'll put a bow on that one as well. We'll move on to the Chiefs' next fourth round pick, just 2 picks later. And I think this is a lot of people's favorite pick. I think this is my favorite pick. They picked up Washington State DB Jaden Hicks at 133rd overall. And when the Chiefs picked him, he was Dane Brugler's number 1 safety in the entire draft, not just at that spot, not just available at pick 133 in the entire draft. And the Chiefs got him at 133. And Brett Veach kind of talked about this too, but this was one of those picks where it's like, did we need a safety this high? Did we plan on taking a defensive back this high? No, but the value was just too good that you could not pass up on the player. And I think Hicks is going to play a lot as a rookie. And I think this is the eventual Justin Reed replacement. He's rangy. He can hit and run. He's physical. He can play cornerback and safety. I really, really love this pick.
You also just got to love the idea of Brett Veach taking 2 defensive backs in day 3. What he's been able to do in the 3rd day of the draft with defensive backs is something that other NFL GMs need to study because it is so impressive. And Hicks is a guy that, like you said, I think he's going to play a lot in his rookie season. There's not really a whole lot in front of him. I mean, you got Justin Reed, and I think we have Deion Bush, but we lost Mike Edwards. So I think Hicks could potentially start right away. And you mentioned his athleticism. I mean, it's all there, and he was the best player available in the 4th round. And I think that, again, day 3 is so often kind of a swing and miss kind of thing. Like you just take a shot and see if it hits. And I think the Chiefs drafting somebody so athletic, the best player available, I can't hate this pick even if it doesn't pan out. But with Brett Veach's history of drafting day 3 defensive backs and our coaches in the defensive back room, I love this pick. I feel really confident that it's going to work out, and it's going to work out quickly.
I think so too. Just really good value. Is a guy that's going to play rather immediately. I think kind of like even Chamari Conner did last year. Chamari Conner, I think, was also a 4th round pick, and he played quite a bit, especially in the postseason down the run there. And you just look at the depth chart in the secondary: Chamari Conner, Jaden Hicks, Justin Reed, Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, Brian Cook, all just a ton of talent and a ton of athleticism too across the board. Veach is building quite the secondary.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. So in the 5th round, the Kansas City Chiefs, 159th overall, they took Penn State center Hunter Norzad. Now, this was my first kind of little head-scratching pick of the draft for the Chiefs. I was like, okay, interior offensive line, I get it. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, Joe Tooney, they're all kind of approaching the end of their contracts in Kansas City. You want to kind of get ahead of the curve there. And also you lost Nick Allegretti. He was kind of that 6th starter or that 6th offensive lineman first off the bench. And he really, his value really was, he proved his value in the Super Bowl, stepping in for an injured Joe Tooney, and also the AFC Championship game, I should say. So this is kind of almost the Nick Allegretti replacement, at least early on. And then we'll see what he does after that. But this definitely felt like a pick that was for next year. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain too much about it. I was just kind of like, okay, interior offensive line, you had other needs, but I understand it to an extent.
Oh, I totally get it. And I think, listen, the Chiefs didn't do it with Rodney Hudson. They didn't do it with Mitch Morse. I don't think they're doing it with Creed Humphrey either. Center is a very replaceable position. I think Creed's market's going to be a lot. I mean, he is the best center in football, you could argue, and especially now with Kelsey not being there. So I almost wonder if this is the replacement pick, or at least somebody that they think, could potentially, take over in a couple of years when that contract's done. I remember even when the Chiefs drafted Creed Humphrey, they brought in Austin Blythe. So this could just be a backup move, but who knows if this is the replacement.
What if, because Brett Veach has talked about this before, it was kind of an under-the-radar quote that he had. It was at the beginning of the offseason. He was asked about Creed Humphrey potentially moving to guard in the future. And he didn't rule it out. I see that Hunter Norzad has played guard and center. His first year at Penn State, he started 8 games at left guard. What if this is a move where he plays center, though, and Creed Humphrey gets moved to guard? I could see that happening potentially. And then Creed Humphrey slides in at guard. And then there was another pick that the Chiefs made that we'll talk about here in a little bit that maybe steps into another guard spot, or you still have Lonnie Morris. And if he doesn't win either tackle spot, maybe he kicks inside. The Chiefs are building a lot of good depth on the offensive line. I'll give them credit there. But what do you think of that idea?
I just kind of question if Creed Humphrey would do that, knowing that he'd make more money as a center. Like, I think he would.
That's the thing is he would have to be paid. Well, he'd make more money as a guard. But the thing is he's never played guard. So would the Chiefs try to get him at a discount, be like, we're going to pay you as a center and then move you to guard? Because the guard market absolutely blew up this offseason. It's like Robert Hunt of the Miami Dolphins got $20 million per year. And like Robert Hunt's good, but like $20 million a year for a guard, all of a sudden that Joe Tooney contract doesn't look so bad either.
No. Yeah, that's not good.
So yeah, and maybe the Chiefs are looking at that guard market, that interior offensive line market, and they're saying, maybe we'll just go cheap. Maybe we'll load up so these guys can just kind of step in there next year. And that's a good money-saving tactic, but we'll kind of come back around on that debate because the Chiefs drafted another interior offensive lineman in the 7th round. But in the 6th round, 211th overall, the Kansas City Chiefs selected Tennessee cornerback Kamal Haddon. This is the signature Brett Veach late-round defensive back. Another really good athletic profile. Now, he was the lowest RAS score of all the Chiefs draft picks, but he still was a 7.5, which is pretty good. And he led Tennessee with 8 PBUs last year. And that was even with a shoulder injury that caused him to miss the back half of the season. Also tied the team lead with 3 interceptions. He's got good ball skills. And that's the other thing about Jaden Hicks too that I really like is like you're getting a couple guys that bring ball skills to the secondary that's kind of lacked ball skills in the past. I don't know too much about him, but you just kind of have to give Brett Veach the benefit of the doubt at this point with these guys.
He's not expected to start right away. He's just coming into this already stacked cornerback room. And can he make a contribution? Maybe. Can he not? I mean, who knows? But the Chiefs already, I mean, they were high on Nick Jones last year. They got him late in the draft. He got hurt, so he's coming back. So, like, we have a very deep defensive back cornerback room. And so I'm not really going into this with any expectations for him, but I do kind of like what the Chiefs were able to find in him because he was really good in college. And listen, some players, you mentioned his low athletic score in comparison, but I mean, some guys are just ballers. Some guys don't test very well. I know Nick Bolton didn't test great at the combine, but I mean, we're both Nick Bolton fans, so yeah, I think that
for sure
be the same.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it wasn't low. It was just lower relative to all the freak athletes that the Kansas City Chiefs drafted. And that's a perfect segue into their 7th round pick, CJ Hansen, the guard from Holy Cross, another freak athlete, 6'5", 300 pounds. He was first team All Patriot League selection 2 years in a row, team captain as a senior. Now, with this pick, I was like, okay, we're doubling down on interior offensive line now. Okay. Kind of needed a running back, kind of needed a defensive tackle, whatever. But at this point in the draft, 248, I think there was like 10 picks left. So anyone else that was available there, you most likely could have gotten them as an undrafted free agent. So I'm not going to complain too much. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Offensive line is another position almost like DB, where it's like you look at all the guys that the Chiefs have brought in the past couple of years and you wonder how everyone's going to make the team, especially if they plan on bringing back someone like Donovan Smith.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs, especially in the later rounds, take shots at guys at positions that they know they can develop. I feel much better about taking a guard or taking a cornerback in the 7th than like taking a receiver or taking a quarter. Like, I do like that they're going at guys they think that they can develop and can do something in this offense. But I do think that this is a good pick, especially they could have addressed the like running back need or the defensive tackle need. They did do that kind of in the UDFA market, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But Yeah, I'm not gonna scold Brett Veach for not getting a running back in the 7th when you could probably find somebody in the UDFA market that's just as good.
Well, so that brings us to the conclusion of this draft, and I gave them a letter grade when I went over the draft class a couple of videos ago, and I gave them a B plus because I felt like they got incredible value at almost every single one of their picks, guys that people projected going a lot earlier, and even though they weren't necessarily needs, even though tight end wasn't necessarily a need, even though safety wasn't necessarily a need that high, the Chiefs just they had guys fall to them that they couldn't pass up. So I get it. But the only reason I didn't give it an A or an A plus is because I felt like defensive tackle and running back were two really big weaknesses and still are. And the Chiefs just kind of seem to be ho-humming there this offseason, which is kind of why I wish they did a little bit more in free agency. And yes, they brought in some UDFAs, and I'm sure we'll discuss a couple of them. But yeah, I kind of wish they attacked those needs earlier on because right now, this running back room is Pacheco, CEH, and Nada. And defensive tackle is Chris Jones and a bunch of cast-offs. And that's no disrespect to Mike Pennell. I know he had a great Super Bowl, but that's not a guy that I think should be starting 17 games in 2024. So,
Break him.
Yeah, those are my thoughts on the 2024 NFL draft. But Michael, where do you fall, and what letter grade would you give the Chiefs?
I'd give them a B to a B plus. I'm leaning more towards B plus. I think they addressed, the position groups that they needed to fill players at this point in the Chiefs' life cycle. They're a Super Bowl champion, back-to-back Super Bowl champion that's going for their 3rd. They didn't have any glaring holes that they needed to address. They found supplemental guys. More often than not, they went with the best player available. And when you are contending for a Super Bowl with a team that already has so many guys, I'm not going to complain. And so it's kind of hard to be upset with the draft class. I'm not going to get overly excited until we see kind of, what some of these guys are going to be able to do. And it might take a couple of years to really evaluate the draft class. But I think that they were able to get guys at position groups that they needed. It might not have been the most flashy draft, but I think that they did a really good job of finding players that can fill those positions for depth. And that's really all I care about in the grand scheme of things, because they were able to win 2 Super Bowls with teams that we thought were less than, adequate. So I'm
last year, you mean?
Yeah, last year, a perfect example. So I think this wide receiver room is already better than it was last year. And, you got a lot more talented players later on in the draft. You got more offensive line depth. So I really can't, say anything bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the deepest team, the deepest roster, the most talented roster of the Patrick Mahomes era. It's just those couple of glaring holes, and then there's a couple of things I would have changed, a couple things I would have changed with the Chiefs' approach in this draft. Like I said, defensive tackle and running back, especially running back. Like that's the biggest thing to me, and I know I've gone on and on about it recently, but CEH is your running back too right now. And Brett Veach even had some quote the other day that really annoyed me about how the undrafted free agents the Chiefs brought in will be fighting for running back 3. And it's like, what has CEH done to be the de facto RB2? I don't like, he averaged 3.2 yards per carry last year. So was still super inefficient. He had some moments, he did, and we gave him credit for that. But we're a Pacheco injury away from him being the starter and your running game just being gone.
What I was going to say, Josh, I don't want this to happen, obviously, but Pacheco's one wrong cut from tearing his ACL and never being the same player again. Like with his burst and athleticism and his speed and how furiously he runs, one lower body injury and he is cooked, and we're cooked. So I would like to see, maybe the Chiefs bring somebody else in. They're really banking on those UDFA guys working out, and hopefully we see like a Isaiah Pacheco situation where he does, or some of these UDFAs do beat out Clyde for the number 2 spot. But I guess they're banking on Clyde kind of bringing what he did last year to this team at a more, consistent level. But we've run this thing back 4 years in a row now, 4 or 5 years in a row. We've seen what we're going to see from Clyde, and we're not going to magically find some hidden talent that we didn't know he had before. He's just a mediocre running back. And especially in a day and age where you don't have to invest that much in the position because they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
You just sign guys off the street that are going to compete for RB2. So I think that says a lot about Clyde and just what the market's like overall.
That's kind of where I'm hoping that maybe the UDFA route is not the last resort. Maybe there's like a late offseason trade or someone gets cut from somewhere that the Chiefs say, hey, this guy would do pretty well here. I'm kind of hoping something like that pops up. But otherwise, it looks like CEH is at least going to be in that rotation, which is whatever to me. It's funny, though, because I did see someone on Twitter say something to the effect of, hey, Clyde is going to ball out this year because he knows he's going to have to earn that next contract. And it's like, was that not what he had to do just this past year? Like, that was his last year of his contract. And for some reason, the Chiefs brought him back. I mean, J.K. Dobbins was out there. I know you weren't huge on him, but it's like, now looking at what there is, J.K. Dobbins sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? But let's talk about the UDFAs because there are a couple of running backs in there that are intriguing. But I'll ask you real quick. I don't know how much research you've done on the UDFAs or if you've seen many of the names. Are there any that have stood out to you at all?
So I haven't done a ton of research. I did like that Steele kid, though. I think he had a lot of burst. And then didn't we pick up a TCU running back as well, if I recall?
Yeah. Imani Bailey, running back from TCU, teammates with Jared Wiley this past season. He's the most intriguing to me because, and I've actually watched a couple of these guys' films so far. There's a couple of the UDFAs that I really like. Imani Bailey's really interesting to me because he had like a 1 RAS score, like a 1.4 RAS, which for the running back position especially is like almost a death sentence. But when you watch him, he has a ton of bursts. He's been clocked at over 20 miles per hour at TCU. He ran for over 1,200 yards last year. He's a good pass catcher. He appears to have a little bit of wiggle. I have no idea why he tested as bad as he did. He's also undersized. He's only like 5'7", 200 pounds. Like, we're talking even smaller than CEH. So he's really interesting to me. Carson Steele, I watched him. He's got some good pass catching ability as well. He's got some Kyle Juszczyk in him. I think he's almost more of a fullback at the NFL level than a running back, but he's someone that can come in on third downs. The only thing I really dislike about him is he cannot pass protect whatsoever. His technique is pretty awful. And I saw him get lit up just a few times in one singular game against Coastal Carolina. So he's both of them are interesting. I'm hoping one of them pops. It'd be nice if they did. A couple of the other UDFAs that I like, Fabian Lovett, the Florida State defensive tackle, kind of reminds me of like a souped up Derek Nottie, a little bit younger, purely a run stuffer. He's not going to give you much pass rush, but you can tell he loves football when you watch him play. And then probably the best one that the Chiefs picked up, and the one that I would not be in the least bit shocked if he actually made the roster, was Penn State linebacker Curtis Jacobs. Another freak athlete, was one of the best coverage linebackers in this draft. I would not be shocked if he was the 4th linebacker for the Chiefs next year, most likely because they don't have one right now. So he's kind of the de facto 4th LB, but the Chiefs usually carry 4 linebackers, and he seems to be really talented and he has upside. I also saw him make consistent plays in the run game. One of the biggest negatives I noticed about him, though, was that he had some very inconsistent tackling at times. He would try to like knock a running back down with his shoulder, and then that wouldn't work, and they would bite them later in the play. But he's really interesting too, because it's like, I don't understand how he at least didn't go in like the 5th, 7th rounds. I mean, he was way too good to go undrafted in my opinion, but those are just some of the guys off the top of my head that I really liked.
I will say, Josh, we have learned a thing or two about undersized running backs that don't test very well. So, I mean, he is faster than Clyde, but man, something about that scares the living hell out of me. And I don't know. I haven't done a ton of research. I just know that I heard about the linebacker because I think the linebacker should have gotten drafted. Wasn't that the case?
He should. Yeah, I really don't know. I can't. I looked at his film and I cannot find a reason why he was not a drafted player. I just don't understand it.
It's interesting. I don't know, but Yeah, hopefully the Chiefs find something in those guys. I'm not really gonna hold my breath though, just because every
Hmm.
year there's one UDFA that everybody loves, and he's gonna make the team. He's gonna make the team, and then he doesn't end up doing anything, or he makes the team and then he gets in trouble like Justin Ross. But
Just never gets on the field.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, either way, it's
Yeah.
not gonna make much of a difference, but who knows, man? I mean, the draft classes recently have gotten, or I guess the UDFA classes have gotten better and better. And with guys like Pacheco going in the 7th, it's entirely possible that a running back that should have gotten drafted didn't get drafted because just the value wasn't there, and they
Mhm.
didn't think he was going to be all that. And I don't know what goes into relative athletic score and how he tested so poorly, but maybe, I mean, if you're running 20 miles an hour, how is it that bad?
I don't know. So his combine 40, I believe, was a 4.8. Because I saw there was another RAS score where I guess it included his pro day numbers and it bumped him up to like a 3.5. But I think he still only ran like a 4.6. And it's like, I watch. Now, he doesn't have high end speed. He doesn't have the long speed, at the second level of the defense to like really outrun cornerbacks where it's like once he's behind them, he's gone. Like he can be chased down. But I mean, I watched him play, and like, there's no way he's that slow. I just don't get it.
Who knows? But I mean, either way, I don't think it's going to be super difficult to challenge Clyde's job.
I would hope not. With this staff's favoritism, though, you never know. So I'm hoping someone emerges there. That kind of wraps up the Chiefs draft class. One more thing we'll talk about, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. This is going to be a shorter one, but there was renderings dropped today, and this actually happened kind of late in the evening, I should say. So this was the Kansas side of Kansas City. The legislators over there came up with some renderings that are supposed to be dropped at some point publicly. There were some snippets on Twitter, though, that we got to see of a potential Kansas City Chiefs stadium at the Legends, a dome on the Kansas side of Kansas City. And these are the pictures and what they look like. And I should say, disclaimer, that these are not from the Chiefs. This is not the Chiefs' idea. Clark Hunt, Mark Donovan, none of those guys are involved in this, but this is a plan that is in the very early stages to try and lure the Kansas City Chiefs to the Kansas side. Michael, what are your thoughts here? And what do you think of the stadium? Because honestly, to me, it looks pretty generic. It looks like most other modern NFL stadiums that are being built. Like, this looks like a slightly less cool Allegiant Stadium, in my opinion. Oh shoot, that's the Mizzou Stadium. I didn't mean to click on that, although I would rather have that than what this looks like. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, man?
Stadiums to a certain point are kind of cookie cutter and look the same. It's just kind of how stadiums, I mean, NFL stadiums like SoFi and Allegiant, they're kind of the same. They're still very cool stadiums. All I'm going to say is that Jackson County might have effed around, and they're going to find out. They had a chance to get the Royals and the Chiefs. They might lose both of them. So, listen, I don't really care whether they play in Kansas or Missouri. I will say, and this might piss some people off, most of the fans that go to the games and buy the merch live in Kansas. Most of the people are traveling from the Kansas side to go to Chiefs games. I think there's more fans in Kansas than there are in Missouri, quite frankly. I don't think it'll make too much of a difference. But I will say that it's very telling that the Kansas legislature is like, yeah, come over here. We'll build the stadium. We'll give you whatever you want, because they understand the value of having a pro sports team in your state. And Jackson County in Missouri might have just pissed that away.
Yeah, there's not really much pushback I have to that. Jackson County they were, and I get it. The proposals were not great, but you mentioned it whenever we did that podcast episode. You just kind of have to bite the bullet if you want to keep your pro sports team, because Clark Hunt and Mark Donovan were pretty adamant that they would have to look around if that vote did not pass, and it didn't. And Kansas can offer a lot of money that would not even have to go to a public vote, that they could just give to the Chiefs to lure them away. And these renderings, I don't know if you could see them in the ones that I showed. I mean, they show a brand new practice facility, team hotels, festivities in the parking lot for tailgating, all that stuff. So this is like an entire district just for the Chiefs that would be built, not just a new stadium. And the plans that Jackson County was able to vote on just included some minor upgrades to Arrowhead Stadium, which that was actually from the Chiefs. This is not from the Chiefs. This, I mean, and that's what makes that such a big deal too, is this is all what Kansas would be offering.
And listen, who knows whether or not they're going to move there. I don't know, like, if it would make so much of a deal regardless, because I think there's an expiration date on how long they stay at Arrowhead. I don't think they're going to be there for the next 25 years. I think they'll probably finish out the lease, and they might extend it a little bit until they can build a new stadium, but I don't think they're going to want to stay at Arrowhead for another 30 years. I think they're going to probably try to, move somewhere else. And I know that makes a lot of people upset, especially because you see other sporting events like Wrigley Field and Fenway Park have been there forever, and they're almost like, institutions of the game. And who knows, if the Chiefs keep winning, I mean, you might not be able to move inside somewhere else. But at the same time, Jackson County had a chance to not even be in this situation. And now it's almost like free agency, and how don't mess around and let a player go to free agency, because he's going to find somewhere else that's going to give him what exactly he wants and more, when you could have just given him the money that he would have taken off the bat, and you would have never had to deal with this. And so right now, Jackson County is dealing with those repercussions, and it might come back to really bite them, and it might come back to bite a lot of the people who are going to lose a lot of money because the Chiefs and the Royals aren't in Jackson County anymore. And that's just, I think it's kind of ironic.
Tough situation. And yeah, it's such a difficult situation to analyze, because I totally understand why the plans did not pass in Jackson County, and we've talked about that. But man, I've seen clips on Twitter too of Kansas legislators just laughing and saying, "Thanks, the ball is fumbled and we're going to scoop and score." I mean, they're like gloating like they already have the Chiefs, and I'm not sure it's quite that done yet or anything like that, but they seem to be pretty confident that whatever plans they have, there's been some like backdoor dealing or something like that. Like they know they're getting the Chiefs.
Who knows, man? Maybe Kansas gets the Royals and the Chiefs. I mean, they got the money.
Yeah, probably.
They could build up that Legends area to be something that, people would want to go to. Right now, I mean, Jackson County had a Denny's that burned down, and they had a hotel go out of business. So, I mean, outside of that Taco Bell, nothing's really drawing people to go there.
I've been to that Taco Bell a couple times while tailgating. So yeah, good times. And those times might be coming to an end. But speaking of ending, Michael, that's true. But I don't know if that'll be bringing people to Jackson County as much as it was before. But speaking of ending, we're going to go ahead and end the episode there, since we're actually out of time. But before we go, Michael, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you?
You guys can find me on YouTube at KC Sports Report. Check me out on social media at The Michael Darcy. And go check me out on the Bleacher Report mobile app. My @ is at Michael_Darcy.
There you guys have it, and that'll be in the description down below as always. As for me, you can check out my work on showmefootball.com and arrowheadaddict.com. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this, and we will see you all in the next one. Go Chiefs!